guys, Mr. Lobatch here, back with Teacher's Place. I know it's been a while. I've been out of it for a little bit. I've been out traveling. I'll definitely be making a video about that. But I'm here today to talk to you about how it's been in Ontario, how it's been specifically in York region with supply teaching during the pandemic, during the 2021 to 2022 school year. So I actually supplied for a little bit. I was out in South America from August to November. I got back in November and I was supplying from November all the way until January 6th, I think was my last supply day. And now I'm currently in an LTO in a grade 5 French immersion classroom. I'll be making another video separate to that on how it's been in an LTO during the pandemic, during the 2021 to 2022 school year. But today I'm here to talk to you about supply work. First things first, I supplied for a little bit in my first year of teaching, a little bit in my second year of teaching as well in York region. I taught before that in the UK and in China. Those were full year contracts. I was supplying this year specifically, this school year specifically in 2021, and it was really interesting. I think supply work has been the most interesting it's ever been because of the pandemic. And for those of you who are planning on becoming teachers, you will be if you're becoming a teacher, you'll find it really easy to find yourself supply work if that's what you want to do. If you're not looking for a long-term position, such as a permanent contract or a long-term occasional contract, because every single school, every single district needs supply teachers. There is such a lack of supply teachers. I even had one of my prep coverage teachers who teaches health, phys ed, and drama. She actually had to stay home for a few days because her child didn't have a teacher. That teacher was out of the picture for whatever reason. Might have been on maternity leave, medical leave, whatever it is, or just might have been sick for a few days. And because of that, there was not enough supply teachers to go around, and her class didn't have a supply. Now, there are emergency supply lists, there are emergency even parent lists from what I understand, but they weren't able to find anyone to cover that position, especially because it's a French immersion position. So for those of you out there that are in French immersion right now, or that are in core French, whatever kind of French, you are in such high demand. Now, it's a double-edged sword. Because of that, a lot of teachers that, if you take a day off, if you're sick, if you need coverage for whatever reason, if another teacher is gone, you are taking kind of a chance. You might end up missing your prep. You might end up having another teacher who misses their prep because there's a lack of coverage, there's a lack of supply teachers. This week, in particular, from the week of the end of January to early February, I had missed 2 preps in back-to-back in 2 days because of a lack of supply teachers coming into the school. A lot of people are being hired on as long-term occasional contracts for supply teachers, so they're being taken out of the pool on that end, and there's just a lack of supply teachers in general. When I first came back to Canada from South America, I immediately jumped into supply work, and the first week that I supplied, I actually managed to get phone calls so often that I got back-to-back 2-week coverage before I even started my first week of supplying back when I got home, which is just incredible. That's almost unheard of, I would say, to have a secure position every single day from Monday to Friday for 2 weeks in advance of supply work. That's how much we need supply teachers right now, which is just insane. I have never, in my 4 years of teaching, had this much work and security as a supply teacher, but also as an LTO. I've struggled to really think about it because I've been missing so many preps every single day. Every teacher is missing probably 1 to 2 preps a week just because they have to cover a colleague's classroom. Now, obviously, we're not upset by that. We can't be, because, if a colleague is sick, if a colleague's child is sick, if the colleague needs to do something, that's obviously for them to do, we don't hold that against them because we're missing our preps. And we don't hold it against our principals and vice principals because it's not like they're just sitting doing nothing. They're calling supply teachers, they're calling the preferred list, they're trying to find someone, they're booking days in advance where supply teachers are going to come in just to do prep coverage so that there are people to cover your preps for when you come in and you have a prep day. But it's just not enough. So it's just we're kind of stuck in this bad situation where we need supply teachers so bad, but we don't have enough supply teachers. That's been really interesting because as a regular supply teacher, and even as a French immersion supply teacher, you may not be called in every single day to supply. Before the pandemic, we 100% had a surplus of supplies. That's partially why they ended up scrapping a lot of the education programs that we have for teachers, and why it's so hard to get into an education program. Because we have so many teachers, they're much more stringent on who they allow into the programs. Their programs are being extended. So my program, the concurrent education program, was scrapped a few years ago. I was the last year to graduate with that program at U of T specifically. And part of that was them deciding that they don't need the program because they have the master's program. But it's also because there are so many teachers and it was so saturated in Ontario that they needed to extend the time between people coming into the workforce and people leaving the workforce. Too many teachers had permanent contracts. Too many teachers were working obviously all the way up until they're 65. And that's not a negative thing. They're working up until they retire, but there wasn't enough positions for other teachers, for younger teachers, for teachers coming out of teachers college who didn't have that seniority to apply for more permanent positions, long-term occasional contracts. Now this is all flipped on its head. Now, if you're a supply teacher, you're like a golden egg, because now as a supply teacher, everybody needs you, everybody wants you. There's never been a time where we've needed so many supply teachers and we've needed so many long-term occasional teachers. Many teachers are taking leave now, leave of absences due to physical reasons, mental reasons, due to just not being able to cope with the fact that they need to teach online and in person and be at home, some teachers, or in person at school, other teachers teaching online only. And there's just so many things going on, so many negative things that a lot of teachers have been taken out of the workforce, unfortunately. And that's another topic of discussion for mental health. It's a really big thing going on right now. And a lot of teachers are struggling to work on their mental health because we're so busy, because we're so time constrained on all these things. And on top of that, there's not enough supply teachers. So even if we wanted to take a mental health day, we wouldn't be able to, because we'd feel personally bad, because now instead of me taking a mental health day and putting supply plans down for a teacher who I know is going to come in, who I know is going to teach the class, now I know 99% of the time it's probably going to be one of my colleagues, and that's going to affect their mental health negatively. Even if it's not for mental health, even if it's for a doctor's appointment, taking care of one of your children, helping a family member, something like that, and you need to take a day off, you know a lot of the times it's going to fall on one of your colleagues. And that's just something you, as a teacher, you know how it feels to lose your prep, and you don't want people to go through that, especially when everyone's kind of in the same boat. Everyone's struggling right now. So that's part of the reason why we need so many supply teachers. Now, working as a supply has been interesting because immediately, a lot of the times you're going to be stuck doing prep coverage, because a lot of places, a lot of schools are just offering up prep coverage to cover the whole day, a single day, different classes, and you're going through and you're teaching grade 2 art, grade 6 math, grade 4 English, grade 7 French, and it just bounces you around from place to place. As a new teacher, excellent experience, honestly. Yes, it's important to establish a connection with your class. Yes, it's important to stay with one class, learn the curriculum of that grade. But it's also important to get a wide range of classes, a wide range of ages, and a wide range of topics, so that you can kind of find your niche in terms of where you want to end up when and if you get a permanent contract. You can focus on older grades, younger grades, but do you know exactly, do you want to have grade 5 or grade 2? Do you want 3 or grade 6? We don't know until we've kind of gone through all of those stages as a supply teacher. It's kind of a rite of passage, but it's also important to do because it helps you identify A, where your weaknesses are and where your strengths are and where you'd like to be. Now, in terms of money, because that's also important, as a supply teacher, yes, your job security is lower because you're being called in day to day, technically. Now, not so much. Now you're booked fairly well in advance, but you are still making anywhere from, I believe it's 240 to 260, somewhere in that range as a supply teacher a day, which is very good. Now, as a supply teacher, you do have much more flexibility. You do have much more freedom. You're able to go home. You're able to not think about what you taught that day. You're able to go home and not worry about report cards or reports or marking or planning the next lesson, because as a supply teacher, you're not required to do those things. Supply teachers are called in to teach a class. They're required to be there, be present, follow the lesson plans that are left for you. But at the end of the day, a lot of supply teachers, they don't have to take that burden of that classroom home with them, as opposed to a long-term occasional teacher or a regular permanent teacher. So yes, you are being paid a little bit less, but it depends on where your headspace is at. If you don't need to have a long-term occasional contract or a permanent contract, which yes, does help financially a little bit and with job security, if you're comfortable with being having a little less money and being less secure in your position, it's much, much less stressful. I can guarantee you that. I did supply work for a few months, and as a teacher, now in an LTO position, it is much more stressful. I come home, I mark, I come home, I plan, I come home, I take notes, whatever I need to do to make sure that I'm ready for not just the next day, but the week after, the month after, and then the term itself. So there's a lot of forethought and planning that goes into having a more permanent contract as opposed to a supply teacher. Now, that's not to say that the job itself is not stressful. As a supply teacher, a lot of the perception is that you do have a little bit less respect just because you're coming into a classroom that you're not as familiar with. You may have never entered the school as well. So students don't know you, administrators don't know you, the other staff doesn't know you. So you're a lot less personal with that position. There's a lot of missed opportunities for connections, especially if you're a long-term occasional or permanent teacher. There's a lot less opportunity to necessarily make friends or have important discussions with colleagues because you're just in and out. Personally, I absolutely love my time as a supply teacher. I love my time as an LTO as well. And again, like I said, I'll be making another video on LTO position. And when I do eventually, hopefully, get a permanent contract, I will be making a video on the differences between supply teaching, long-term occasional teaching, and permanent contract teaching in a whole separate video and comparing all three of those things. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, please subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a great day. Bye.